Hello and welcome to the Hardy Brain, the show that takes athletic, introverted entrepreneurs and leaders and transforms them into ironclad brain performers. I'm your host, Dr. David Hardy. And today on our show, we've got another amazing guest. He is the Skid Row CEO who went from being homeless and addicted to being an advocate for possibilities. Welcome to the show, Joe Roberts. How are you doing today?
Yeah, very good. Great to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. No, this is a pleasure to have you. And what a story and journey your life has been on, and you're out there really helping and impacting the lives of a lot of people. For those who haven't heard your story, can you kind of set us off on this journey and kind of the turmoil that you've gone through then?
Sure. I grew up in rural Ontario, about an hour and a half north of Toronto, and typical, lower income, middle class family. Dad worked at a seatbelt factory, and things were perfect for
Okay.
the first 8 years of my life. And unfortunately, my father passed away suddenly at 35 years old. And what happened next was a series of really unfortunate events. The stepfather was an abusive alcoholic. I was looking for escape at 9, began to experiment with drugs. By the time I was 15, I was kicked out of the house, kicked out of school, getting in trouble in the community. And at 19 years old, I thought it was a good idea to leave Ontario, and I went to Vancouver and found myself in my late teens, basically a street kid on Granville, and then eventually the downtown east side. And for a number of years, I struggled. And, my drug consumption went from, alcohol and pot to heroin and cocaine. And so by the time I was 22 years old, I was a guy pushing a shopping cart, disheveled, unrecognizable to myself and family. But life didn't end there for me. I had this really bizarre chance encounter on a bus stop bench with an older gentleman named Gus. And
Okay.
I'll never forget this. It was a 12-minute conversation. And he looked at me and he said, Joe, he says, you're a remarkable young man. If you were able to deal with your addiction and homelessness, you could do something extraordinary with your life. He said, there's more to you than you can see. And what was interesting about that, David, is that for the first time in my life, someone other than my mom or my dad spoke to my possibility, my potential. What was sitting beside him was a kid with dirty black fingernails, scruffy, beard, broken teeth, matted hair, clothes, terrible personal hygiene. But he looked past how I was showing up, and he spoke to my potential. With the help of my mom, I went back to Ontario. I got into alcohol and drug treatment. That led to me going to community college. I graduated with honors, and I came back to Vancouver in 97, got involved in business, and in less than 5 years found myself on the cover of Canadian Business as a celebrated entrepreneur. So in less than 12 years, I went from living under a viaduct to having more success than I could have ever imagined. And
Wow.
so,
Yeah.
to your point, the thing I believe in most is human possibility, because I'm not special. I'm not. I represent that access to transformation, to change, that when we move past the emotional impact, like take a look at the world today, there's so many people that are impacted in so many different ways. Yet we are not defined by what's going on in the past, or even what we think is going to be our future. When we step through that and have the courage to take action in the face of negative emotion, that's when it all changes. And so that's what I spend my time doing now as a speaker, is to go to various different groups and share that message. It's inspiring. People love this kind of a story. But then
Right.
point to some of the key pieces in the model that we use to create that transformation. And that's when it becomes a little bit more tactical.
Well, on this point though, people hear these stories and they're automatically drawn into it. But the thing that's missing, like even if you were to really describe all the traumatic and horrible events along the way is that there's a lot of time in there
Mm.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, like you mentioned, all of a sudden 9 years old, and then in your late teens in Vancouver. Like those are formative years in a person's life as well. And then yeah, kind of, okay, well, yeah, I was on the streets for this long period of time, and then yeah, got clean and had success. And there's a lot of deep struggle in there. And I know people that are just going through things right now that probably the biggest thing that gets in the way is just how much time passes by in these moments. Can you kind of speak to that, and where you were left in this process, and kind of the moments of despair or not seeing changes?
Yeah. I can't help but look through life without sharing a model with listeners because how I see the world has been shaped by how I think and process life's challenges, whether they're uninvited adversity or invited adversity. We'll talk about the distinguishing differences between those. But I think that when you look at struggle, we could define that as broadly call that a roadblock, R, right? So what are the roadblocks and the challenges that I faced with? They were enormous. Early childhood trauma, the two big things, the non-processing of the grief of losing my dad, and then the
Right,
ongoing verbal, emotional, and physical abuse of my stepfather. So the trauma and the roadblocks, and then the stories that sort of will emerge from that, that I am finished sentence. And that finished sentence never was the proper narrative for me to be successful. And so that persisted until one day we began to take a little bit more of a penetrating look at that. But there was an enormous amount of struggle because of that narrative or internal roadblock. Because the way I finished that sentence for over 15 years of my life wasn't good. And so if you believe you're not worth it, if you believe you're damaged, if you believe you're not capable, well, then you're going to see the world through a probability mindset, not a possibility. Dr. Dweck talks about growth versus fixed mindset. Dr.
right,
Becky
yes.
Kennedy talks about the learning zone. You're not going to lean in. If you're a kid, you're not going to lean into a learning zone if you've already predetermined that you're not worth it. You don't have
No,
it.
not one bit. No.
So failure is a reason to quit. Whereas resilience doesn't feel good. We've been spitting this word around for 5 years since COVID. Resilience feels terrible. Like in sport, when you're in mile 22 of a 26-mile marathon, that doesn't feel good. Yeah? It feels terrible. But if you've got the next thing, which is purpose, reason, a drive, right? So you've got roadblocks. We all face roadblocks. By the way, it's not just internal roadblocks, there's external stuff. Turn on
Oh,
the news.
absolutely. Yeah.
So much going on. And then what happens is the external bounces to the internal, and it becomes this sort of vicious infinity loop, right? So how do you break that? I think that there has to be some really good, solid reasons. And for me, in the very beginning, the reasons for wanting to change or transform were really self-preservation.
Okay.
So I looked at the world and said, if I continue, this isn't going to end well for me. At the time I sobered up, I was 24 years old. At 24, the party for me was very much over. I started to lose friends. And so the I, or the inspiration, or the reason was self-preservation. So I think that we look at what are the roadblocks, what's going to drive you to change, and then there's the action. So when I look at this, it's like there's three letters: A, action; I, inspiration or purpose; and R, roadblock. So whatever, to anyone listening to this, it's like, think about a challenge you're working on right now. Maybe you haven't been successful. Maybe a health challenge, maybe a balance thing. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a career move. Maybe you want to write a book. Maybe you want to go help people in the community. Whatever that is, what is that possibility defined? And then ask the question, what's in the way? What's going to drive you to push through what's in the way? And then what are the list of things that we need to do?
Okay.
So I look
So
through,
all of this theory sounds extremely helpful right now. Um, but did you have that framework when you were doing it?
no, not defined as such.
Right.
But what I
Yeah.
did have was the resilience to keep my feet moving in the face of negative emotion.
That
And
is
so the
something.
simplest advice I give
Yes.
to
Yeah.
anybody is to keep your feet moving in the face of negative emotion. When we sit on the couch too long, when we get stuck in our heads, then the roadblock gets bigger and the action gets smaller, and the reason to the impetus vanishes. And now we're stuck. We're in the rut. And this is about as normal human behavior as tomorrow's sunrise. It's just so predictable. And this is what happens.
Yeah.
Whether,
And
like, look at
oh,
every New Year,
yeah.
sorry.
Well, I've seen this pattern too with people is that, and I would used to, when I was practicing in the US, get referrals in the post addiction realm. And I was working on, well, different ways to physically rewire the brain. And I'm meeting with one of the like heads or up there in the trenches, though, uh, clinicians who was telling me right in front of me, he's like, I can set my watch to when people are going to relapse.
Mhm.
And he's like, the models we have, we know this small percentage is going to get through. And it's frustrating because after a certain amount of time goes by, I guarantee you, even after all the inspiration they've had and the changes they've seen, um, there's usually a relapse at this mark. And if not, then usually at this one. And so this whole notion of time and these roadblocks and the action, I think you are kind of special that you had some grit and determination underneath to kind of get you through that. But what's amazing is that you're putting that grit into a theory and into formulas and into steps that really need to be out there. And can you kind of just walk us through uh, where you see that with relapses? Because I'm sure during your time going through recovery and everything that there were more people that went back than got better.
I did. I experienced relapse 12 years, 5 days clean.
Wow.
I was what they would call a one hit wonder. I came into the rooms of recovery and I went to treatment, got involved in the community, and it was set up well for me because I socially connected, and I went 12 years and 5 days. And it's interesting that you say it's predictable because I know 24 other men that also relapsed after 12 years um, clean or sober,
Wow.
which I found very interesting because we called ourselves the Dirty Dozen. And
Yeah.
a few of them didn't make it back after 12. I did. I was, but I came back with a different vigilance and a different humility. But yeah, I got clean in 1991 and I went, everything was really great. And in 2003, I had some elective surgery. They gave me medication that I should have been more accountable with, and it was a slippery slope. And I sort of burned down my life and then came back. And um, on the 13th of March, I celebrated 19 years. But having been through the relapse, it gave me a very, very unique perspective on on uh, the frailty of long-term recovery that you may not see. It's funny, when I look at, if you see it through a disease model, not everybody does, but if you see it through the disease model, It's like I have this thing that tells me I'm awake when I'm asleep, and that's scary. So I've got to put pieces in there to hold me accountable, and that's other people, that's community. Um, but the model came after the relapse, and that's when I got in 2010. I connected with Dr. Sean Richardson. Sean's a former Olympic athlete. He rowed for the Canadian rowing team. And on the back end, he didn't medal, but on the back end, he leveraged his experience into Olympics to write his PhD on injury in elite athletes. And so that's where the AIR model came. When he and I began to work together and collaborate, he gave me his insight. And as a psychologist, it was brilliant because he was able to give me insight that I wasn't able to sort of extract in the recovery process that I was exposed to. And it gave me a sort of a language and framework to then think through and see those experiences. Like you asked, well, what was it? It was, for me in the beginning, why I was successful in business and why I was successful in school and in recovery in the early days was just the tenacity to keep my feet moving.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
because often when we're going after big things in life, we don't actually know how to do it until we take those steps forward. And often it's going up those cul-de-sacs that lead nowhere that give us insight. And I have found most of my learning has come out of the peripheral. It's never the direction I'm headed. It's what I'm learning along the way and go, oh, that's
I
interesting.
hear you
That's
on that
interesting.
one. Yes.
And I think that's, when you look at research, isn't that what research gives us? It's like you may have a bias or you think it's going to, and then you discover something and all of a sudden it's like, well, no, the data and the evidence actually doesn't say that. It says this. And I like that curiosity, but you're not going to discover that if you're not simply in motion. Right. And I
Right.
found the same thing with the physical stuff.
Well, on this point though, too, like you mentioned, yeah, kind of the drive and then being curious and exploratory. And all of these things are both drivers of addiction and also drivers of success. And how do you kind of differentiate the two then? If it's a disease model, one leads to success, one leads to using and compensating or going down wrong paths. So how is that theory kind of flawed or correct?
I think it's flawed because you can go out in the world and get everything that the Western world promises you and not be any less ill.
Wow. Yes. Yeah.
I have a friend of mine and his brother. Um, he's bumping along the streets of East Vancouver, in and out of prison, struggles with his mental health, struggles with dual addiction, substance use disorder, the whole nine, right? And his brother is a billionaire who's, I won't say what he started because then I end up outing him, but he's extremely successful. But I sat down with the brother because he's a friend of mine, and I've said, I leaned in and said, okay, you got whatever, you know, 14, 1.4 billion in the bank.
Right. Yeah.
Are you any happier? Like, okay, you bought a helicopter, cool, but like, so in my experience, I have found that even though I've sort of gone out into the world and leveraged that as a way to sort of hang a carrot and chase after things, in the quiet moments, I don't know if I'm any better. And so that's depressing. But what I try to do with the time I have here is to do things that fulfill me. So you can
Right.
easily go down a nihilist wormhole on this and go, well, then it's all meaningless and nothing. Yes. But in that nihilist wormhole, you can say, okay, it's dark in here. Why don't I turn on the light and I'll make meaning out of it? And that's what I try to do. So it's like, yes, at the end, it may not mean anything, but I can give it meaning. I can put a label on it and chase after things that fulfill me and bring kindness, joy, healing to the world around me. But I would say that a lot of the things that I've chased after in life, what was driving me forward wasn't necessarily health.
Okay. Now you mentioned this like satisfaction, this fulfillment, and everybody goes, "That's from within," and it is. um, and so is addiction, trying to feel something and feel something different. Um, so with that being said, though, you found these things, low doses of positive ways to make yourself feel better. What have been some of these other things? Like we talked how, yeah, you think part of the recovery or to feel better is physical. And how do we build this physical side of us that, yeah, leads to other sensations other than despair, but leads to happiness and the positive emotions too that make life rich?
I found it by accident, and it was the trifecta. At
Yeah,
45, and no, I did. I stumbled into it just like everything. My mom always says, "Oh,
everything else, yes,
yeah." My mom says, "You're
yeah,
so lucky," and I'm like, "I don't know, Ma. That's kind of insulting, but I'll take it." It's that I try so many things that I'm exposed to more things that may work. After being successful in business, I wanted to do something altruistic. And I wanted to raise the volume for other kids that came from backgrounds like me to give them a fighting chance to transition into adulthood and not end up on the street like I did. So I decided to walk across Canada pushing a symbol of homelessness, a shopping cart. It was
yes,
this monstrous campaign, seemingly impossible. I'm a non athlete at 45 years old, attempting to walk across the second widest country on earth, pushing a shopping cart. So when you look at
and in bad weather, like
yeah, well, one
let's add
Canadian
bad
winter because
weather.
there's no walking across Canada without at least one winter because you
Oh
can't really
no,
do 45, 50K a day, which would give you the entire country in 10 months. But so what happened for me in that training and lead up process is that I got deeply involved in physical challenge, which then fed emotional well being, all while chasing something that was altruistic. So when you look at Dr. Martin Seligman and you talk about the hope circle, there was this combination of I'm doing this for a greater cause. I connected in with this bigger community of like-minded people, and I was exercising 4 and 5 hours a day, which is just uh, so good for you. Did I face physical challenges? Enormous ones, but I think the combination of those pieces created I think it really reached, it changed. Well, I don't think it changed the way I see the world, see myself, and it stretched me into what was possible for me physically.
wow,
So I successfully did this. It's 9,000 kilometers, took 17 months. We had 454 events. We went from St. John's, Newfoundland, all the way across, all the way down into Ontario, up through Northern Ontario in the winter, and eventually into Vancouver the following September. We raised a ton of money. We got the biggest part for me was getting to engage with over 100,000 kids.
right,
But when that was done, a friend of mine who's a physician, I was talking. He's also a recovery guy, and I was talking to him, and I was all grumpy. And he called me out on it. He's like, "Why are you so grumpy? Like, what's wrong with you?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm just crusty." And he says, "What are you doing for exercise?" I said, "I just walked across Canada. I don't exercise. I put my feet up." He laughed at me. He said, "Dude, you need to pick a fight with a sport. Like you have to find something to keep doing because your body was so used to having all of the benefits of daily exercise,
yes, yeah.
and you now know that you can do things that you didn't think you could do before." And so that's when I got into long form triathlon,
Okay.
and and began training in 2018 to do a half Ironman, and then I was all set to do the full Ironman in 2020, and the COVID shut all the races down. But I did it anyway. I
Oh,
trained for it, and I actually did it on the day. And I didn't do the exact race format in that location. We picked a different location,
yeah,
so the people that could crew for me were able to. But I would say
fantastic. A lot
probably
of
more.
people would have said no, like, "Oh, it's done," and took that as a rejection. You completed it. Excellent. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
I like hard things.
it sounds like it. Yeah.
The cool thing, and whether it's hard for like, you pick your own hard. It does. You don't have to do an walk cross country or do an Ironman. You pick your own hard. What I find now is I'm 59 and I have a whole bunch of these sort of weird little goals I want to do that are all physical, and that keeps me moving. And I would say that for my mental health and physical well-being and sleep and its impact on my relationships with my kids and my spouse, that physical exercise correlates with the level of well-being of my recovery.
Right. Yeah.
And when I'm out of action or out of integrity on exercise, I feel it way more than physical.
Oh, yeah, definitely would. Now, on that point, though, we mentioned time earlier being a hindrance to things. At this point in your life, with the addictions and everything fairly far back in the rearview mirror, um, how much has that helped you and gave you that peace of mind? That it's probably harder to feel it now, but you know it was there. You know it was instrumental in who you've become and what you've gone through. But on that other side, is there more peace now that it's farther and farther in that rearview mirror?
Well, some parts of it are, some parts of it aren't. There's some parts that still linger. Um, I'm probably prone more to despondence and depression. I think that goes, and again, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know, but I think that it goes hand in hand. When I look at my community of people over the last 35 years, uh, yeah, so I don't have the urge to pick up and use. Um,
Right.
but obsessive compulsive behavior, depression, these kinds of things that are very well worn neural pathways for me still linger. The difference now, though, is they don't linger for weeks; they linger for hours, and then it's like, oh, okay, that's that. Okay, here's the toolbox. Let's do that, that, and that, and now you can alter your state because it's just, you see it coming down the highway way before it hits you, and I don't feel like escaping with, let's say, substances today, but the urge to run will still surface. The urge to really want to change how I feel, especially when there's so much going on in the world today, and there's a lot of uncertainty and fear.
Right. Yes.
And I think that's really normal human behavior. I don't know if that's necessarily um, the leftovers from addiction. I think that when human beings don't feel safe, they look for ways to alter their emotional state. And some of us have good habits. We yoga, we exercise, we journal, we talk to a therapist, we go to a group, we play guitar, we garden. Others eat, drink, death scroll social media, isolate, worry.
Right. Would you say then the biggest gift you can give people is certainty?
The biggest gift you could give people is certainty. I don't know. I like it. I like the uncertainty. I think that if it was really certain, I think it would be boring.
Right.
I mean, life is lived in between those lines, right? I like doing something that's hard that I'm not really sure if I could do it or not. I kind of dig that. I mean, other people that might scare them off, but I kind of like, Well, Marie and I were down in Sedona, and there was this crowd of people going up the cathedral cut, and there's this very specific cut, but it's really crowded and it's one way traffic, up or down. And I said, nah, let's go this way. And we ended up we ended up on an ascent we had no business because we didn't have rope. We didn't, but I'm like, come on, we can do this. Come on, we can do this. And I don't know. I think that yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I would want to have the complete certainty. Although I think there's part of all of us that would love to have it all tucked away. But isn't that the illusion?
Exactly. Yes.
Right? It's like we all seek this sort of safety, but we're hurling at whatever 35,000 miles an hour, spinning in this massive void. And one day the lights are going to be out, and we're just striving for that relevance. And we, pretend like everything that we're doing and everything that's happening matters, and it doesn't. And
Right.
again, but you. So I don't. I think that's an illusion that we're going to be safe.
Yeah.
I
And
have all the things in the Western world that say will make you safe. I don't feel any safer. I don't. I all the things that some people might work to get when they're 65 and retire. I've had those for years. It doesn't. It just your worrisome nature will then just find something else. It's like, okay, I'm not worried about that anymore. Now let's worry about this other thing.
yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how humanity actually works, functions, and our own voices and directions that we lead ourselves down. And what is a few of the next big or next things that you're looking forward to and that you're doing? I heard there's a couple real good talks coming up as well for yourself. You've got your book. How else do you kind of get these real amazing and grounded pictures of psychology and humanity out there?
I think the greatest tool I have is just sharing the story in various different contexts, depending on who I'm in front of. Sometimes I get asked to speak on safety and wellness. Sometimes I get asked to speak on leadership or high performance. So the room is always different as a sort of a quote unquote motivational speaker, which I don't think there is such. I think there's speakers that have inspirational messages that will spark something and then somebody gets momentum. But I don't,
Right.
I think motivation is a sort of a violent uh, concept, whereas I like to think of the spark, get somebody moving forward. What I'm working on right now, so I speak, I run the foundation, I go to where yeah, folks need my brand of story and message, and the context is always different. Police leadership versus safety versus government versus entrepreneurs. So it's a fun endeavor because it's no conference or show is ever the same. But um, I'm going to be 60 this November, and I
Happy
decided I
birthday.
wanted to. Yeah, yeah. Well, I wanted to pick a fight with something hard because that's kind of my thing, right? So I'm training right now to walk 60 kilometers on my 60th birthday. I want to be
Wow.
that guy who's 75 at a Tough Mudder race or a marathon where people go, "How old are you?" I'm 77. That's who I want to be. For no other reason than I want to be a good example for my grandkids. My why on the physical
Yes.
is to live long. That last 10 years of life is good and healthy, where I'm scrambling up Gross Mountain or I'm doing the hike or I'm on the Appalachians. Like that's sort of who I want to be. I don't want to sort of dwindle. I want to,
Right.
yeah.
I love it. And Yeah, that that gets my juices flowing. So
Yeah.
you are doing it. And how do people find more information about you? Where do they reach out to you?
I've got a profile on LinkedIn, Skid Row CEO Joe Roberts. You can also find me through any AI search or a Google search for Skid Row CEO. The foundation side of things, the push for change, has got its own presence online. I'm not that hard to find.
Great. So
Yeah.
definitely reach out to Joe Roberts. And, well, stay tuned to the next episode of The Hardy Brain, the show that takes athletic, introverted entrepreneurs and leaders and transforms them into ironclad brain performers. Take care.